Share this window. Hello, everybody. Am I sharing the right window? Yes, okay. So, welcome to the meeting. In terms of action items, I don't think there's any major updates here. But in terms of shepherded item updates, any updates around inline assembly menu?
The LLVM PR just got merged, or will be later today. The actual RFC is, the discussion has died down, so I think we're pretty much done in terms of initial discussion.
Are you referring to the ASM RFC?
Yes.
Okay.
I think there hasn't been any new posts for a week now.
The LLVM ASM RFC?
It's renaming the old ASM macro to LLVM ASM.
Okay, did that?
Yeah, that just got merged.
Got it.
The PR got merged.
Right. So the RFC got merged at some point. I forgot when, maybe a long time ago.
Last week, I think.
And the PR will be landing soon.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Safe transmute, I don't think anyone here is involved in. I heard Ryan told me that something's happening, but that's all I know. So for FFI Unwind, we were waiting on people to kind of write up what they thought, but these are the kind of things that exist so far, right? So I posted a comment in favor of C Unwind. This highlights some of my thoughts. Central also in favor of C Unwind. Felix didn't write a comment, but seemed to favor C Unwind in our pre-RC discussion. Adam was preferring C because I think it, if I remember, is basically that it presented a kind of simpler overall feeling for systems programmers. It seems like on the basis of this, the decision is clear enough. So I think we should try to move forward with the C Unwind. Hold on a second. Sorry. Come on, honey.
What?
Leave. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Where was I? Oh, right. Yeah, so I think we should go forward with that. The only question I had is, you were saying, Amanio, about kind of the scope of what RFC makes sense, that you would want to include the behavior of foreign exceptions, and I was saying we could possibly just say that's UB and we'll resolve it in this follow-up.
Sure, I guess we can leave it as future work.
I would basically just like to get these guards and things landed and the UB existing and closed and so on. But do you?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
But we can discuss that, I guess, at the meeting. But do you want to summarize a little bit what you did in this PR?
Basically, if catch unwind catches a foreign exception, so C++ exception, it will return a box for an exception as the caught type. But when you try to rethrow that box, it gets rethrown as a Rust panic. Because we can't actually capture a C++ exception without adding a dependency on the C++ runtime.
Right. And that doesn't seem like a good idea.
It might be something that people would want to be able to opt into, though. I don't know how, though. I guess that would require us to be able to rebuild standard or something.
There are
catching,
options, but
is catching a foreign exception a sort of best effort thing?
it should catch anything.
It seems
So,
sort of
I mean,
difficult.
okay,
technically.
it assumes that the foreign exception is using the same unwinding mechanism as what Rust is using.
Right.
In particular, this means that if you have cross DLL unwinding on Windows can get a bit tricky if you have two separate instances of libunwind. That's one example.
Seems like the only other
Yeah,
possible behavior would be,
but I mean, if the foreign exception isn't using the same unwinding mechanism as Rust is, then it's just UB anyways.
Right.
that's probably, I have the impression that in Windows cross DLL, like,
So
there are a lot of things one must be careful about.
it works, but you need to depend on the libgcc DLL. It has to be a separate DLL so that there's only one instance that's shared by everyone.
Yeah, okay.
We do support this for the case of Rust C, which has multiple DLLs. But yeah, let's not go into the details now.
Probably enough, but that is on our list of things to cover, which is why I was thinking might as well strike while the iron is hot. But it seems like
The details get very hairy.
we can certainly, like, if we're saying that foreign exceptions, are UB at the moment, we're not, and we have some room to experiment with different behaviors. But,
Right, yeah.
but we have to decide whether to land this, I guess, is the point.
I mean, in theory, it's just an implementation detail in that since foreign exceptions are currently still UB, doesn't matter whether we catch them or not.
Right, that's what I'm saying, in theory.
In terms of take mute being sound.
Yeah, so some code is assuming
Right,
that
yes.
is using catch unwind for soundness to.
So that crate either assumes that it gets caught or aborted or it's UB. One of those would work for that crate.
Yeah, it can't. Yeah, okay, I guess that's right. So basically a key constraint would be, or whatever happens, catch unwind must have one of these behaviors to make rayon / what was the crate you were saying?
Take mute.
Take mute.
Oh, take mute, yeah. / etc. sound.
Why haven't we added that to the sound library, by the way?
I don't think Rayon really cares.
Oh, rayon cares.
If it's not caught, it gets to the root of the thread and just aborts the program.
Well,
which is sound, but
I suppose that's sort of true. Rayon cares that destructors run in general, but I suppose in this case, it may not care that much. Exception is, but I guess you're saying because in the case of Rayon, that depends, right? So right now, Rayon never runs. Rayon always uses a helper thread. But if it ran if we allowed you to use threads outside of the worker pool, which we thought about, then we would start.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I guess, do we want to decide one way or the other whether to land this PR, I guess, is the question. Because
one of the options that Mark suggested was to abort if we catch a foreign exception.
right. They seem like the only two real
Yeah.
options. Well, it could just remain perma UB to throw foreign exceptions that are not caught.
Well, we could catch the exception and abort and still declare the UB and do this as a best effort thing. Like sort of, we haven't guaranteed that we will keep this.
One note is that as currently the PR is sort of stated, it doesn't actually update any of our documentation. So like we don't, the main reason why I still wanted some sort of laying sign off is because historically, especially in this area, we've had very sort of, it is UB, but people depend on it. And in practice, we are hesitant to change things.
It affects my opinion. I guess it doesn't matter too much, but if we said that we'd never intend to allow foreign exception lined across FFI boundaries, then C unwind doesn't have much purpose, right? Like, the thing that can unwind across it is Rust panics.
It does, because it's still useful if you want to have a Rust panic that goes via foreign code and then back into Rust.
Right. That's the use case that we originally.
No, I mean, because you could just say that C allows you to propagate panics in that case, right? And you're not.
Well, then that.
All that means is we would not mark C functions as.
Yeah, then we're back to proposal 3.
No, but we're not, because the main downsides of proposal 3 was around, well, what happens when you change to, you introduce UB when you change to, when you change to panic equals abort, and that's no longer true because that only mattered because of forced exceptions. It's okay, we don't have to go too much into it, but it's just an interesting, I think we should move on.
So, you don't think we should make any sort of decision?
I think the decision is going to be part of the RFC from the FFI and Wine group.
Oh, okay. So we don't land the PR right now?
I think we could land it because it's, as we said, it's not modifying.
Right.
It's unstable to access the foreign exception type, for example.
Right.
You can't really.
So why?
Actually, that foreign exception type isn't even exposed.
Yeah,
Right.
it's impossible to identify.
So why did we? Why would we abort instead of panicking? Unwinding. Mark suggested that.
The main reason is that I personally feel like if we abort your program, people are less likely to rely on the behavior than if we do a reasonable thing.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I tend to agree. One thing, we do have a message, right? Like this opaque string that we pass when we.
Yes, but that string is only actually printed in the panic hook, which is before the exceptions thrown. So if you do catch unwind and resume unwind, won't actually reprint the string.
Well, but if you abort, then
we never touch that string.
Oh, so we never print it
after it's thrown. Do we?
Yeah, because I was thinking maybe you could say something. This is unstable, blah blah blah, or this is really be in the string. But it seems like that wouldn't actually seem viable.
In terms of the documentation, we should, whatever we do, I think we should explicitly document that the behavior is not to be relied upon. If we don't, like, not just leave it unstated, but explicitly say.
Yes. Could could you file a PR against the reference and the Nomicon?
I mean, I'm sort of in Mark's camp here then. If the intention here is not to provide like a hint as to what trajectory we're going on for this semantics here, then we probably should be aborting.
Yeah, sure, but aborting is still sort of
something. It's still something. I know it's not. You know.
Either way, I think we want to cite over and say this behavior is not stable. The FFI Unwind project group is working through it. Like, if you have an opinion on what it should be, that's the place to go.
Yeah.
I will also note that the current like catch and wind function docs are very vague, and the way you can currently interpret them is like, we catch some panics, but not all panics. And it's very sort of up in the air whether it can actually be used for what take mute does. So there is some.
The actual.
I think that's referring to it won't
like
catch panics if panic equals abort.
It tries to get at that, but the way it's worded, in my opinion, like, I've never been able to convince myself that that's what it actually means, beyond like looking at the implementation and knowing that that's what it means.
All right. I propose we move on with no firm decision.
Yeah.
Take this to.
All right.
This is enough time for this meeting. I don't have I would be okay with landing a board for the record, but I think we should.
Yeah, I think so. But if you can add some docs to like the nomic on the reference and the actual docs on the function itself, that would be great.
So nominated PRs I wanted to jump to. Let me just close some tabs. So there's the Tilne opened a PR to accept tuple.0.0, which we, when this originally was proposed, we opted not to because we didn't feel like changing the lexer. And I don't know how well people feel that decision has aged. I know it annoys me from time to time, though usually I take that as a sign of I should probably have fewer tuples and make some names. But
it's a valid point.
But I guess there are two questions. Do we feel this needs an RFC, or can we make it in a PR, and do we want to make a decision now?
I think this is the sort of like small thing that if we made it an RFC, people would write a bunch of not very productive comments. And I think it would probably be better if the main experts like Petrchenko gave his view on how this makes sense from a Lexing technical point of view. MacLeod already gave some opinions, and then we can like make more. Like, do we want this, and do we think it makes sense technically?
I'm inclined to agree that it's a minor thing. I don't think it merits an RFC. I don't know how important it is to bring this to the attention of the wider community.
Yeah, it doesn't seem very like earth-shattering.
So do we want to try to reach a decision now? I haven't looked at all of this myself.
I was hoping that so MacLeod has gave his opinion on some things, but Petrchenko hasn't yet. So I was hoping that he would have given some thoughts before.
I think that's good. I'd like to see their opinion as well and have a chance to digest it. So why don't we move on for this moment and we'll revisit it. I guess I would say this before that though. Is there anyone, at least present in this meeting, who, is opposed to this on principle? If so, you should go leave some comments. Catch for and exceptions. Okay, we discussed this already. So discussed above. Decided that abort is a safer semantics, but didn't reach a firm conclusion. or consider continue async.
Maybe add some notes about the
Um, limit maximum alignment in repro align to 4K. Okay. Manu, do you want to say anything about this?
So basically, the context is that lots of operating systems slash linkers slash tool chain slash whatever don't really support global variables with large alignments. At least on Linux, the limit seems to be on Linux. The limit seems to be page size. Windows, the limit seems to be 8K, but we're not passing the right options to the linker, so it's actually 4K.
Okay.
Maybe this should be target dependent. I'm not sure. Although that would make code less portable.
Yes, it's target dependent. I'm not sure. It depends really. It's limitations of the linker and limitations of the whatever is loading our executable into memory. So the OS.
But whether this should be an error or not seems like it could be controlled by the target triple, possibly.
So it's definitely unsound to promise a higher alignment than what we currently deliver.
Is 4K, like 4K is universally
4K was just to get creator run.
okay. It seems like
It is the limit on Linux and Windows.
And what about like
I haven't
ARM
used
and
Should we reach out to the embedded working group?
seems like a good idea.
yeah.
In terms of ARM also has 4K page size. It depends on the operating system.
Do we have use cases for, like, I looked through the issues and there doesn't seem to be, like, nobody actually says, I want this. Just people saying, it doesn't work.
No, I don't think there are any use cases, hence the creator run, just to be sure.
Yeah. Though the data isn't in yet, so.
So is the proposal here that if you say rep or align with a constant that's too big, that's an immediate error on the attribute, or?
Yes. So, okay, so we have two options. The first option is to error on any alignment if you try to put an alignment greater than some target dependent value, let's say, so 4K, then it's an error. The other option is to allow large alignments, but don't allow them for statics. And this gets a bit more complicated because you have other issues like constant promotions, and a bunch of others as well, I'm sure.
I think that's not worth it.
I'm just pondering a restriction like right now we don't say your arrays can't be at the most 4 billion. We say, well, that type that you tried to make is too big to fit on your current target. I'm sort of feeling like in the abstract, this is that same kind of error. It's like, it's not necessary. It's not like a virtual machine error to specify, to request a type that big or an alignment this large. It's just your platform doesn't actually support that right now. I don't know if this distinction is meaningful, since I agree.
Think so.
I can't think of anything where I care more than about 256 byte alignment anyway, but.
That's sort of how I think about this as well. That this is like a concession to platforms on reality, sort of.
I guess the only other side I could see to it would be that at some point, I assume we would like const generics to be able to set alignment, and I don't know what we would expect a bound on a const generic that was trying to set alignment to be, or if we care enough to resolve that question now.
If we have if we could always remove this restriction, right? So
True.
so this would give us options.
When you say const generic setting alignment, you mean an alignment specified with an expression?
Yeah.
Because it
That
seems
would
like
be-
we will be able to evaluate that to a value, right? Like at some point or another, we have to know what the
Yeah,
alignment.
but then is it an early is it a monomorphization time error on the type because the alignment happened to be that big, or does the const generic have to have like a where clause to constrain the value
Depends, I
to be
guess.
below 4K?
You could also
Ah.
impose a restriction that you are not allowed to mention any parameters. Yes.
I found an issue that originally raised the minimum alignment to any 32-bit value because somebody wanted an alignment of 32K.
Ah,
Interesting. What was the use case?
It's
Can you link it or
some
Babison?
ARM embedded thing. One moment.
Time check, we're at 30
Yeah.
minutes.
It's like we can wait for the trader run into.
Added the link. Yeah, somebody needed an alignment of how much is that? A lot. One megabyte alignment, apparently.
But
Maybe we
does
should
that
ping
work
that
on their?
person.
Does that work on their system? In that case, it would be affected by your PR, since the target presumably allows that. Then.
Yes. So
Why don't we ping that person in the thread and come back to this next week?
okay.
I think I want to make sure we get through things. Next issue, so I put this on, it's a closed PR. The reason I nominated it is that I think this changed the set of programs we accept. So the PR,
Valley.
yeah. We're not
So-
central.
Sure. So specifically, if we have a for loop and the path is a Q path, a qualified path to some pattern, and invariance, for example, then we could then this could parse, and this has parsed since like 1.1. But semantically, it only got accepted in 1.38, or I think, when we allowed type relative resolution to enum variants. But specifically, remember that you need a univariant enum in this case, more or less, for this to compile, and because it needs to be irrefutable. Which makes this pretty much useless in actual code.
Could be a struct or something. I guess that's what you mean by univariant enum.
No, it still has to be a univariant enum because of the projection. Unless you're using, no, it has to be. I think. Yes.
Oh, I see. This has to name an enum. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think, and this was sort of an oversight, I think, when we stabilized that feature in 1.338. And so now we're sort of, this PR added an insurance policy so that we could have syntax for explicitly quantifying generic closures if we wanted to. So why this PR came about? Someone approached me about they and like three of their friends doing a university project over like 1 year on some Rust project or something, and was wondering what if I had any suggestions on what they could work on. And so I suggested the theme of working on improving closures, and so yeah, that led to a discussion with Eddie, with me and Eddie in private, and sort of we realized that we hadn't future-proofed this thing, and I sort of realized that this bit could break when I was actually looking at the parsing code. It was pretty close that I actually didn't realize that it's possible to break this.
Okay.
But
we didn't do any crater runs or anything, but this this landed not that long ago, I guess.
I don't think it's worth doing a crater run on this specifically. We can just do it on the beta run, and we can, if it caused major problems, we can always revert. That should be pretty easy.
I'm going to ask the really stupid question now. If someone wanted to write the for enum variant code, do they use a parenthesis or something? How do they do it now? Not that they're going to ever do that.
That would work. Yes, just add parentheses around the pattern, and now it works. Maybe I could actually.
What we're getting an error for is for an angle bracket now. Like what is that? What happened?
Well, what happens is it tries to it tries to parse generics instead of a path, and that's why it fails. You could sort of tweak the error message a bit to maybe use backtracking and maybe suggest parentheses. It could be an option. I would have to look at that. But
it tries to parse generic if there's an angle bracket. Is that what you mean?
So what happens is that we try to okay, so we try to decide. We check if there's a for keyword, and then we try to decide whether we should parse generics or like a for loop, and then we if we decide for the former, then we try to parse the quantifier before like function pointers and bounds. And we try to parse that, and it will get an error inside that. And we could do backtracking when trying to parse that and figure out, okay, would this actually work as a pattern instead? And then we can suggest parentheses. Although this is sort of niche case, unlikely, so maybe it's not worth it. But I could do that if y'all wanted to do that.
Well, that's just for error messages, right? You're suggesting. I don't know that. Yeah, I don't care about that. I just wanted to understand what rule we actually had now. I don't know. I'm okay with this change. I think it would have been nice to ping the team, but I think it's a reasonable future-proofing change.
Cool.
Is that enough? Anyone have any further thoughts or comments? Okie dokie. This we have left behind. So there's two other things here. Is this span resolved at and span located at?
Yeah, this is basically check your boxes and we're done.
Okay.
Do you want maybe some
Please, Dave.
context, please?
What's going on exactly?
So these are two methods on the span API, and resolved at takes the current span and resolves it at with the hygiene of the other span, and located takes the current span and changes the location to the other span. Keeps the hygiene information, and this allows for like better diagnostic than in macros.
So they're kind of the same method, right? Just switching, like A dot resolved at B is the same as B dot located at B.
I think so.
Okay.
But I think it makes sense to offer them both of us from a readability perspective.
A mixed site.
Yeah, this one is maybe a bit more involved. So
Let's look into this for a while.
so currently we have a hygiene called mixed site, which is basically the macros hygiene for the bindings and such. It will use depth site hygiene, but for other things it will use cross site hygiene. And so this is exposing this to port macro authors. The main rationale for exposing this is the PR that this is a prerequisite for. So if you go to the top.
Does this enable? Okay, go to the top.
That one, yeah. If you open that one. So this is a sort of prerequisite for doing this. The reason we've been hesitant to stabilize proc macros in expression patterns and statements is that we haven't exposed a reasonable hygiene option for users. So right now, if we stabilize this without mixed site, they would use quad site hygiene, and this would be very bad for expressions and the rest.
So is this enabling like people to write things without using proc macro hack? The same family of use cases.
Well, to give you an example of what this would enable, it would enable Rocket to become stable.
It would enable what?
The Rocket crate to move to stable. This is, I think, this is the last case that they are using.
That's a like maybe can you say more on how? Well, okay. Do you have? Okay. I don't know how they're using it, so that doesn't tell me exactly. But I know that proc macro hack is used for a lot of stuff, right? Beyond Rocket,
So Rocket, I think they are using it for better diagnostics, and they don't want to move to stable before they can retain those or something. I'm not exactly sure what they are using it for. But also be some internal feature that they need these expression level macros. Perhaps for the URL macro, I think they have something like that, which is a proc macro.
Okay.
I'm not exactly sure what Rocket uses it for. I just know that rocket needs this to become stable.
So I feel pretty, personally pretty motivated to make something like proc macro hack that works, that doesn't require using a crate called proc macro hack, and hopefully is less of a hack.
Yeah.
However, this has been, or this is that perennial issue of we don't know quite what's going on and do we like it or not like it or whatever.
So
I'm wondering. Go on.
So one concern I had, which was resolved, is that this wouldn't be the default option in quotes. So while people could do the right thing, the defaults in quotes sort of nudge people in the wrong direction. Like you have to use quote span instead of the quote macro, and explicitly pass in mixed type, which is suboptimal. And unfortunately, there were some breaking changes in we create around tested this, and if we would change the default in quote, then some crates would break. So detail and didn't feel like it would be reasonable to make a breaking change right now or introduce another macro or something like that. But they sort of assuage my concerns because they would add some dots to the crates, which I felt was reasonable.
They added
I
what?
think this will be fixed over time.
They added a new way to do it to the crate. Is that what you're saying?
No, just they basically said they would add some documentation on the pitfalls. Like think about this as a user in like sin and code, which I think is reasonable.
Do we think we could migrate people with deprecation?
In the quote crate,
Mm-hmm.
that was something we suggested on the thread, but David didn't feel that would be proportionate right now.
Okay, so my thing I wanted to ask is, would it make sense to use a design meeting slot to talk over this proposal and maybe do a little more like detailed look at the overall hygiene picture and bring it back in? If so, I think it would take some prep to get to the right person. Not looking at Felix here.
I'm not exactly sure what you're thinking in terms of design. What this does expose is a hygiene option that we have in the language, have had in the language for a long time, and isn't going away. So
yeah, but so it may not be productive, but what I would like is to spread the knowledge a little past Petroshenko,
right.
what that sentence you just said means, expose that, like,
Yeah.
how is it working and so forth.
Right.
The problem is it would require like.
I think you would need Petroshenko there and maybe Matthew Jasper as well.
I don't know if you need them there, but you would definitely need to talk to them beforehand.
Well, I don't know how productive it is to have a design meeting without the people who you could actually ask questions.
Well, I mean, the idea would be that whoever's going to lead the meeting would go and talk to them beforehand and actually understand it, right, and then explain it. So that's kind of the prereq for doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know that anyone's up to that work.
But it's probably a lot of catching up to do, though. Hygiene is hard to understand. Really. But I do agree with the sentiment that we do need the bus factor on hygiene is way too low.
I feel like a design meeting is a good idea, but we probably don't have the energy or bandwidth to do.
But do you think that should block this, or do you?
No, I don't.
Like
it should. That's the main concern. I think it would be good for someone to put in work and try to Like,
Right. Yeah.
the purpose of the design meeting isn't so much to do design in this case, I would say, as it is to
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
explain
sense.
what's happening. But I'm concerned that if we do that, it just won't happen. Like,
So perhaps it would be, perhaps since this is more about like writing something down and learning about it, perhaps it would be more productive to and spread the knowledge around more to try to add something to the Rusty guide, like
Yeah.
a lecture or something with Petrochenko.
that is reasonable. It's another approach. Yeah. I know. Okay. All right. Well, people should leave questions or check boxes. This has been pending for quite a while. So
The FCP didn't start that long ago.
Yeah, but the comment thread is fascinating.
I know it's been on my list of to-do items for what feels like forever, but it's probably only been a few weeks. That is, review this PR and give meaningful feedback. It's one of the items. But
Time check, we're at 10 minutes to end the meeting.
I think we are coming in now. We don't have any new nominated issues. I don't know about that. We didn't look at RFCs, I don't think. Any updates on the instruction set? RFC Felix should be unnominated.
No,
What about the
no
unsafe
updates.
blocks and unsafe functions? All right.
The unsafe block, unsafe functions, I did notice, is that blocked on me still or not? I had a concern and I was reviewing the situation. I was trying to understand what the current situation is, like whether I should just resolve my concern or not. So
You had a concern?
on the unsafe block and unsafe functions, I was the one who had posted like the formal concern that was trying to encode what
The
Taylor and
concern.
others had said. And I was trying to then read the summaries of later discussions, trying to figure out whether we had decided something that was going to resolve the concern or not.
Right.
My impression is that we have, and that we need probably a new FCP, or just entirely bypass it, because the thing that I think we have consensus on is that we don't actually need any RFC or FCP here, because we're just adding an allow by default, essentially. And then separately, there will be more discussion around the broader question of whether we want to change things in a more sort of severe sense of what the defaults are.
Right, and we wanted to split the lints, the existing lint into, and make it a lint group or something as well.
Yes,
So
but my
that
understanding, none of the currently planned changes have implications for Lang team that I think we have concerns on as a, or that Lang team has
Yeah, that
concerns
makes
on.
sense. Yeah.
Possibly
So-
modulo boats, but I think they had some concern about Nico. I think you were saying that, like, whether we wanted unsafe to be more like the default change, but I think that doesn't apply to the lint change. But I might also be misremembering.
Yeah, I agree with Nico in the direction we want to go in general, but I don't think we have consensus for that change yet. But it seems like we should cancel SCP and then do either the author wants to make a new PR or make the change here.
I'm feeling confused of what to write here. I guess maybe I remember we had more consensus than we did.
I think
amongst the meeting members.
It seems to me like this, the summary you can put here is that the consensus we reached amongst the Lang team, whatever it was, it didn't match what the original FCP was for. And that's why we should cancel the FCP and call for a new one that summarizes the new idea.
Well, from what Mark said, it seems like we would need a new FCP. We would just need to cancel the old one.
In my opinion, the current action item is to cancel the FCP and close the PR because it does not do like at all what we sort of want to do. It's an approximation, but like there's so much discussion on the PR that moving further with the current PR seems not productive.
Right.
And we can
That's-
obviously like tell the author that we would be happy to see a PR for the allow by default lint. That I think we have consensus that is not a bad idea to add.
Yeah.
But we could FCP the lint separately to make sure.
Are you specifically excluding the idea of changing the default at the addition boundary?
No, the lint is like a necessary prerequisite for any change in defaults, as far as I understand it.
So it's basically we're taking a smaller and smaller step towards somewhere, which could be that. I think that seems reasonable. Let's see. Let me cancel the FC. This is the RC.
I agree. But maybe, yeah. It seems like a little too small of a bite to chew to me. I feel like we should, like, if we're not gonna change the default, we should just leave it as it is. If it's consistent now, and it will be consistent if we change the default, and it will be weird.
Well, I think it's if for no other reason than for internal use in the standard library. So like if we don't make this, I think it would be even productive to just make this a ROSC internal lint.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is helpful, but in the recent exploration of like B-tree code and so forth that I've done, I would have found this lint immensely helpful, independent of whether we have, you know, a default on for the lint, because I can just enable it in standard library or whatever.
Yeah, I find that very helpful. Very persuasive.
And I think that it will be easier to convince people that the default change is reasonable if we can say the standard library does this and the standard library has found it helpful. Here are, you know, links to code examples.
All right.
It's a really
I won't
good,
stand in the way.
yeah.
I think we should go for the whole hog, but I won't stand in the way of a little bite.
I completely agree with you that going further is what we should do, but I don't think we have consensus on that just yet.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see, which one is it? Yeah, that one. Okay, so I will cancel the FCP, and maybe Mark, you can leave some comments for the author.
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
And close the PR.
Sure. I think you can organize the remaining work as you see fit.
It could also be left as an unresolved question. I would add.
Yeah, I cancel FCP.
I'm saying we could make an RFC that says we will add this link, and we may or may not change the defaults to be resolved later. It's the same thing, but it's a little different. All right, seems good. I guess that's the end of the meeting. Thanks.
All right, bye. Gotta go.